Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are finishing the regular run of Manhattan Projects with Volume 5, issues 21 to 25. However, we are not finished with Manhattan Projects after this week because there is the follow-up series, which I actually, if it's okay, I want to frame this discussion with the letter at the end of issue 25 from Hickman.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll read it. It's not particularly long, but apparently I'm having trouble even saying that word, so we'll see how this goes. This is a letter from Jonathan Hickman. So what's next? If you're one of those people who follow announcements of which comic books are being solicited for publication in the future, then you already know that there are no new Manhattan Project issues scheduled for the next couple of months. If you're not one of those people, then now you do. The book and team will be on hiatus until March, when Manhattan Projects will return with a few, but rather significant changes. Nick and I always knew that when the comic got to a certain point, we would be changing format, as Manhattan Projects was always intended to eventually be a book where we could tell any kind of story in any genre we wanted. We were also aware that doing so would mean that we would be changing the entire structure of the book. Gone will be the sprawling ensemble narrative that moves each individual character's story incrementally along, and replacing that will be tight arcs focusing on a single or few characters. Nick and I have been planning this for quite a while, and we also felt that such a departure deserved a clean break. So, in March of 2015, we'll be releasing the Manhattan Project's The Sun Beyond the Stars, and couldn't be more excited. More juice in each issue, more pages, and way more fun. Get ready for something that we think is going to be pretty special. Yours in Super Evil Science, Jonathan Hickman.
Now, that makes an incredible amount of sense when you look back
at what's been
retroactively. When you look, I think specifically at Volume 5, because Volume 5 is where the story splits effectively.
Yeah.
You know, they divvy up all of the various characters. They kind of go off into their own kind of separate stories. There's some that we don't even really get anything out of. I think, so we have, let's break them down. Right. So we know we open up issue 21. Again, this is the Ryan Brown issue. So we're done with Oppenheimer's, but we have a Leica issue. Ryan Brown comes in for that, but we get some continuation on Leica's story and what's happening out there. We know that Werner Braun Braun and Yuri Gagarin are going off to space to find Leica. So that's one story. We see Henry Darlian go off into the desert, become like a nuclear god. We get like 3 panels of that, right? Yeah. There's a little bit there. We know the Einsteins and Feynman are traveling the multiverse through the monolith. And we're left with Groves and the other general whose name's escaping me, the 2 military men, the non-scientists. They stay behind, and they're still trying to run the Manhattan Projects, as we find out through the regime change of Kennedy to Lyndon Johnson. So they've already set up these separate potential paths they could go down. And you could see each one of them being their own little miniseries, right?
Yeah. I mean, basically, he did, what he is trying to do, I would say, is similar to something like Black Hammer. It's all turned into a Dark Horse style book.
Yeah.
And I actually like that he did a big overarching meta narrative first
to start with. Yeah.
Because I think that has always been the hardest thing to sell to non-Black Hammer readers about Black Hammer is hey, and we're going to start on this farm, and this is actually pretty close to the end of all of their careers. And they don't know how they got here. We don't know how they got here or who they were before they got here. All we know is them playing in this little sandbox, and it kind of branches out slowly from there. And you get little keyhole views into what the world was before this thing. And then as soon as you start to get the picture, it switches away to a 6-issue miniseries of well, here's Black Hammer 45, and here's Barbalian, and here's all of the. So it's just like it is big and sprawling. It's doing the same thing, but Jeff Lemire likes to write that in such a way that you never got a clean, simple version of the story to map everything onto. You just keep getting presumably it exists in his head, and if you keep reading all of this stuff, you will eventually compile a complete picture of it. It asks a lot more of the reader in that sense to follow Black Hammer.
It does. It's very rewarding, I think, when you do. I think the issue that something like Manhattan, well, not something like Manhattan Projects, that Manhattan Projects has is that the promise of what's to come doesn't show up, Right. So you put the investment in to get these other stories, and then they never happen. And that's how it goes sometimes. I'm not trying to throw Hickman and Pitarra under the bus, but that is the reality of what we get. We only got one of those next stories when there was so much more. I even forgot about the little AI FDR bots that he was secretly in the back, still growing and learning. So that was another potential storyline they could have gone down too. So they've got like 4 or 5 of these things that they could do that they never got around to or couldn't get to. So but in the meantime, I think what we get, the story that we're left with, at least in the main timeline, we get a little bit of the Einsteins and Fenneman as we see a little of them. We see the origins of the journal, I guess, the snippets that we see, the interstitials, the journal that he's writing, and we get now that he's been traveling or he's left traveling the multiverse with these 2 Einsteins. But really the main story we get is this like full break between the Soviet Union and the US. Because this volume is called The Cold War. So we have, in our alternate timeline of this book, we have circled back around to intersect again with real life events. In this case, being the assassination of John Kennedy, and pitting the U.S. and the Soviet Union against each other again. And of course, the Soviet Union here being depicted as like infested by some alien race, like that's what's driving them.
Yeah,
but still, the idea that the link between Los Alamos and Star City is gone. We now have warring factions fighting for supremacy and domination, and it all kind of culminates. At least in this part, it culminates in Dallas in 1960.
Yeah, which is at least the second book we've covered on this podcast that covers the assassination of JFK.
It is, yes, behind the Umbrella Academy, yes.
Yep. It's volume 2 of the Umbrella Academy, yes. Maybe. But
it is, yep.
I was just like, then I started like Googling the authors' ages to see like, oh, this was a very significant moment in their lives. They must be just a little bit older than me. No, they're not that much older than me.
Hickman is. I don't know if Pitarra is.
No, I meant Hickman, and Hickman's 53.
Yeah.
Born in 72. So I think the JFK thing would have loomed a little larger in his life. And then Gerard
Way is probably 50 by now, probably. I don't know.
Yeah. So
apologies if I get. Well, I think
it's 53, and then he's 49. Is Gerard Way. So I'm like, yeah, I think that was probably covered a lot more in their like history classes and things like that growing up, and their parents talked about it more, whereas my life was 9/11.
Well, but see, you were alive for that. I think part of it is that there is an unending well of conspiracy around Kennedy. I think Oliver Stone's JFK came out at the right time for someone like Jonathan Hickman and Gerard Way.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
I think them being,
so they're more interested in the kind of obsession around it than they are directly part of the obsession around it.
And I
that
think
actually makes a lot of sense.
I think when you see how they're depicted, this idea that, yes, it was a conspiracy, but it was so much greater than you could even thought. Like the conspiracies about what we think of like the web that Oliver Stone wove in his movie. That's like it's supernatural, it's alien, it's all these other things, and it's something that is it's so rife with possibility here. And I did really love the explanation they went about through here. Although I did reading this and kind of knowing what was going to happen, like, oh, the magic bullet is actually going to be a magic bullet. Like that's going to come from Los Alamos and all that. It's going to be controlled. The one bit I wish we got a little more of was I wish we got a little more of the Soviet mind controlled Oswald, because we see him we see him be lobotomized or whatever, like we saw with Castro and Che Guevara and all them. But we just get the one thing of like, your mission now is to protect President Kennedy at all costs. And then to know that it was Groves and Lyndon Johnson and it was the Manhattan Project set up to use him as a patsy there. But I would have loved to have seen what was the Soviet mind controlled Oswald of protecting the president look like. Because especially the way they depicted Kennedy. I love the idea that every time we go into the Oval Office, it's just like a party room. It's just a different party. You have Truman, Truman with his cultists, and then you have Kennedy, which is just like the worst bachelor pad in the world. But I love that that's what that the Oval Office has become. But the idea that they have shown, like, and every time we've shown Kennedy, like the pile of cocaine in front of him is like it's going to like Scarface size, it's just like it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So like what would Oswald's programming have been, his mind control have been for the protect Kennedy at all costs, because obviously it's protection on some level from self-destruction, but we never get to saw that, never get to see that in the book. But again, the twist on the magic bullet being something that the Einsteins and Feynman created that got given to the CIA or them, and then it was controlled by Groves and all, like doing all of that to explain the assassination and things like that is that's a fun way, I think, to address the conspiracy through the lens of what Hickman and Pitarra have already established.
Yeah. Like I totally agree with that.
It makes complete sense that in their world, this is the explanation for the Kennedy assassination.
Yes. It's the explanation. And again, you get the characters looking like so like suspiciously blasé and nonplussed by witnessing an assassination. They're hey, unintended hot dog.
Hey, this guy left his post. Sweet.
Like, first of all, you've got God knows how much money from years and years and years of just unfettered government spending, that it's just like there's no way you're in a situation where you benefit from a free hot dog, other than they're just like, what a great day.
Free hot dog, man. Hey, yeah. I don't care how free food always tastes better. But yeah, again, you're right. That the it's not even disassociation, because they're fully aware of what's happening and what the events they've done. It's just there's such a remove from it, that it's like, yep, we did that. That, hey, good call. That was the way to go. And now we're in league with Lyndon Johnson. He knows he's more on our side than Kennedy was. We thought Kennedy was pliable, and maybe he was, but maybe he's too much of a loose cannon. And so, the projects go on, and that storyline clearly would have set up what happens next. Right? Had this story continued with another little mini series following Groves and LBJ, and probably the growing tension between the U.S. and the Soviet Union as we go through. I mean, I think you and I talked about, maybe this was back in the first episode, about where the story could spin to in the future. Now that we've left the confines of the specific Manhattan projects, and the idea that we could travel the Cold War through the 60s and the 70s. Maybe we, what is the take on Vietnam? What's the take on the public? Like there are so many things that you could see them going to that they could have built up here, just given the setup shown in this volume. There's a lot of cool potential there with that story there, and then the flip side is we can do whatever we want, literally whatever we want with the Einsteins and Dr. Feynman, because they're trying the multiverse. So it's like we could toy with known historical events on one side and then just do the wildest and crazy stuff on the other. And then everything else kind of falls somewhere in between.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I had my note pulled up with my next thought and I just totally lost my place. It's been, I don't know what if this will make it into the podcast, but it's been a just total crap fest this morning, trying to do 2 episodes at once with technology.
Technology has not been on our side. But yeah, I guess, how do you feel? We talked a little about this, a little bit of guess here, but like knowing that this is the final volume of this era or this construction of the comic, and reading it before you read the letter, because that letter is at the end.
It's at the end of 25.
Yeah. So how did you feel about reading this? Because to me, even without the idea of, I know this is the last trade, there's only one more after that, and that's a separate story. The way that they deployed the parts of this story, it felt like a closing, and it felt like it could have been the actual end. Like, forget about any of the potential follow-up miniseries. This felt like a fairly decent end to this story, even if I would have wanted more and could have seen more. If it had ended with Kennedy assassination, side with LBJ,
that surprises me a little bit that you say that, because
I know it does. Yeah.
Like I think I would have been one of those people who, let's see, if I put myself actually back in the time, I would not have been someone who's following the solicits. I would have just had the pull list and not worried about it.
I would have been doing that. I would have been following the solicits. And
I would have been surprised by the letter that, like, this is the first, I just finished issue 25, and this is the first I'm hearing that there's no 26.
Yeah.
And it doesn't say fin or the end or anything like that. And there are still lots of unresolved plot lines. Like, issue 21, you get an anthropomorphized dog from some evolutionary juice that gets splashed on him.
Yeah.
Well, that's really the last you see of him. Like, you don't get resolution in that plot. You've got his owner looking for him, but you see 2 people, go out on that mission and they get separated. So it's like, those are splintered off in different stories. So I'm like, I guess, like, it was never a book that promised, like, here's a bunch of loose ends that we're going to tie up. Right. That was never what they were doing. But it still seems like you're opening new avenues at what you're telling me now is the end, and I think that would have caught me a little off guard.
I guess I say it would have caught me off guard, but like, oh, that's it. But I think reading it, be like, okay, I understand that. In that, this I think I talked about last week, the idea that it was a closing of a chapter when you kill Oppenheimer and you start up with what I thought would be the new story focused on 2 Einsteins. This really does feel like, because this is the group actually breaking up, essentially. Everyone goes their own way. And it's about, I guess part of it is like, I guess we've talked about throughout all of these issues, all these discussions, that like, I have no actual emotional investment in any of these characters. So I don't actually care where they go and what happens to them. So the idea that this story would never have a tight ending, I always assumed that. And so the idea that the Manhattan projects as they were are now done because the team has broken up and they all go off to their own adventures. Whether or not we follow those adventures, I don't think in the moment I would have needed that. And I actually don't need that. I don't need that. If it's there, I would read it. But the fact that this is the team effectively breaking up, everyone's going their own way, that says that is the end of the story for me. And that's clearly what Hickman said in his letter, which obviously comes at the end. But basically, this ends one version of this book. So now we're going to go off, and they split these characters up intentionally so they could tell those stories.
But,
now they only got to one of those stories. But if that story didn't exist, in my mind, I'd be like, oh, that's the end. But I could easily get to, oh, I understand it. This story ends with, and everybody goes off to their own things. But the Manhattan projects, everyone being in the base there, that part is gone. And so I could understand, I could get myself to seeing, okay, that's the end of the story. I'm good. Move on. That I don't need resolution to all these stories. Even though, again, you get to the end and you see that Hickman has said, no, we do want to get to these. We just want to get to them in a different way. I wouldn't have needed that, but obviously I would have taken it if they existed.
Okay, but do you buy, is this a little creator speak, or do you really buy that Nick and I always knew that when the comic got to a certain point, we'd be changing format?
I think that's creator speak. I think that's creator speak.
I think so too. I think he certainly was always open to it.
Yes.
And I believe that conversation blossomed. Yes. Like you could tell by, certainly by the beginning of this trade.
Yes.
That
I think
they were committing to that direction.
Yes. I think through 4, I think going through probably ending 3 because of the way 3 ends. 3 ends with Oppenheimer taking control of Los Alamos and starting to enact his greater plan where he's in prison with other scientists. So I think going through volume 3 into 4 and the obvious setup for 5. Yeah, absolutely. The idea of this was always the case. I don't believe that. I think what you said is probably right, which is this was in the air. It was a conversation for them. And ultimately, regardless of the narrative reason why they might do it, if they continued this way, it gives them more creative flexibility of every time we put a new book out, it's just going to be a miniseries, and it will probably just be 4 issues like the next volume is. And it doesn't have to come out every month. We could do 1 and then 6-8 months later, oh, you know what? Here's 4 more. And we could probably do it in a way we don't have to solicit anything until the issues are done. So there are no delays, and if it takes longer in between books, hey, so what? Now it's a true anthology. So this book comes out whenever, and when it comes out, you're getting all 4 issues, 1, 2, 3, 4 months in a row. And then maybe we take a break, we do other projects, and we come back to it. So the idea of them breaking it up, I'm sure at this point, after 25 issues, from a creative standpoint, absolutely felt like the right move for them. And I don't blame them at all for that. I'm again, like I said, I would be totally fine reading a bunch of these miniseries because if they want to give me more story, I'll take it. But the idea that, oh yeah, we were always at 25 and then break it up, that was like, I don't buy that. That seems like he's retconning. And
let's hypothetically say, I assume that this has the classic problem of diminishing sales the longer the series goes, right?
Yeah,
like you're
like everything,
you're down to your diehards by
it starts high, slow decline, and then at some point it's going to level off, and that's what you sell every month.
I mean, you start with issue 1 and it goes to reprint, and by issue 2 there's a 30% drop, and by issue 5 there's a 70% drop, and that's your actual readership for the rest of the series.
Yes, that's it. Yep.
Something like bonkers numbers like that. Yeah. Let's say that number was still kicking high or possibly even growing at issue 25. Are they going to risk changing the format then?
Exactly. They're probably not. Yeah.
So I'm like, and I'm not questioning their artistic integrity in any way. I'm just saying, I think it's a reality where you say, what's the nice way to say this? Fans are dumb. And there are a number of people who are going to see Hickman Manhattan Projects #1 on all of these subsequent series, and you're at least going to collect money from everyone who has to own every #1 that shows up in the comic shop. But also, as a bonus, we're going to actually get to tell the type of stories we like to tell, which are going to be these 4-issue pocket stories. Exactly, it's just what you call a win-win.
Yeah. But it goes back to something that we talked about at the very beginning, the idea that this is an anthology story. It's an anthology structure that isn't an anthology. And now they've their plan is to transition into an actual anthology, which makes perfect sense for the world that they've constructed.
Yes.
It made perfect sense, but I guess it didn't make sense for them when everyone on all of our characters were working together in one lab, under the guise of the Manhattan Projects in world. So they built to this point where they could spread it out and do all that. And then they only get one of them. So I guess the other way to look at this potentially is, what if this had been the whole series? What if every trade going for, previous had been these distinct kind of concentrated stories instead of some, like maybe the first story is just Oppenheimer. The first 5 issues are just Oppenheimer. And we see the world outside revolving around that, but we just focus on him. And, maybe the next, so there is a world where that comic exists from the beginning. Now, does that book do as well? I don't know. I mean, it can work well if for some stories. Sandman is like that. Fables is like that. Astro City is like that. Criminal in some ways is like that. Those are literally my 4 favorite comics in the history of the medium. They're all anthology stories. I love stories like that, but I know has generally been the case for a long time that they don't sell as well. And so I wonder though, if there was even a conversation between Hickman and Pitarra when they started, if we want to make it this way, because they had a sense of the kind of story they were going to tell. This idea of science gone mad, right? Bunch of the smartest people in history working together, and we already know we're going to tell these silly and absurd and ridiculous tales. Was there any talk about doing an anthology from the beginning? And then maybe they were dissuaded against it. And now the book reaches a certain point, like, hey, now we can go back. Now we have the flexibility. Now we have kind of the pull and a little more of the juice to be like, okay, now we're going to tell these anthology stories. Maybe that was the only path they could have gone to get to where they are now. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think there had to be a number of considerations in there, and one of them being, we want to write about Robert Oppenheimer, but it's not really the historical Robert Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
And if you did a 4-issue thing that was just the 4 finite/infinite Oppenheimer, like dream state things, no one would know what the hell you're doing.
I guess I wasn't suggesting the first arc just be those.
No. I know. But I'm just saying,
just focus on Oppenheimer as a character, and then you weave that stuff in.
Right. But I think what happens is, with the big meta narrative they're saying kind of like wink and nod. This is Robert Oppenheimer. This is Albert Einstein. We know this is not actually the people they were. They're facsimiles, but they're clearly variants, and they're all varianted in the same direction, which is toward this universe. So I think you have to establish this universe first. Otherwise, you have to fictionalize everyone, and you can't use historical figures, because I think if you're only doing 4-issue things following historical figures, and it's not actually resembling the historical figure that it claims to be, it's a very confusing premise.
That's solid. That makes a lot of sense to me. You have to establish that. Now
that they're all going to be bent in the same way, you show everybody,
and everybody's screwed up. And then when you follow them for a little while, then you can break them off and be like, there are 2 Einsteins here, and that's not weird for you anymore. You know why that is. And so you can go out and go that way. I can see that makes a lot of sense. That probably is the best, whether that was the intended.
Oh, I suspect that's something the editor said to them. Guys,
that was,
I love the concept, but no one's going to get it.
That was the best path for continued success. Whether or not that was the best creative path or narrative path they could have done, I do agree. That was the best path for this to make sense and be successful long term, was establish the world, establish the version of these characters, establish why they're like this, and then folks will follow them off into their various stories.
Here are the rules.
I can accept that. Yes.
I also think, if he was going for I think the interesting thing is that a lot of people who I don't want to name names of other writers who would have done this, but I think there are people who would have been doing these intentionally alternate versions of characters and just enjoyed the shock value of you being like, oh, you can't say that about Albert Einstein. You can't do that about Robert Oppenheimer.
Definitely.
Like, Hickman is not motivated by that, because I think if he were, I think the atomic bomb drop and the whole conspiracy about how the president called it off, Groves did it anyway because they're all these renegade madmen, that would have been the first issue. That would have been kicking down the door, being like, we're going wild, alternate history, different versions of all these characters, in a pretty compelling first issue. All right, well, I'm going to say the name I'm thinking. I'm like, I think that's how Scott Snyder would have done this series. Is like, this is going to be a highly collectible first issue where the atomic bomb goes off and it's gorgeous. You know, Greg Capullo, atomic bomb blast. All of this other stuff, and you just realize we're in a bonkers universe.
Yeah, it sets the stake for what kind of book it is, and that's a very different type of book. But right, you're right.
That's a book that is glorifying like crazy for the sake of crazy.
Yes.
And
so
Hickman is actually not doing crazy for the sake of crazy. He's showing you the potential like evils and horrors that come from like, if people sever this little tie they have to humanity for the sake of science, and if science goes completely unchecked, untethered, it is a horror show.
There is a weird subtlety to the message there in all of the over-the-topness of this book. Because you're right. The version you described, the idea of this is not the Oppenheimer you think it is, and the whole book is about the book is about undercutting expectations and known facts about historical figures, right? It would be showing Oppenheimer in a certain way, be showing Einstein in a certain way. The book that's focused on that is not what Hickman and Pitarra are doing here. And you're right. It is the idea of it's about the result. It's about the science. It isn't so much about the people who are doing it. You know, these are variants. They're off by like 1 degree. And so you're right. There is that little losing that small tether to humanity is a very small, subtle change. And it's like what they're saying is if we're 1 degree off, like
1 degree off from this.
Look how much exponentially worse it could be than what we already got. So it's like we make one subtle change. Yes. Okay. Psychopathic brain eating version of Oppenheimer, you know, alternate universe, Einstein, literal alien Enrico Fermi,
not
should
human.
be dead already irradiated Harry Dalian. So the book isn't about why they're like this and who they are. Not really. It's about that pursuit of science and knowledge and discovery and moving the ball forward. And if that power is left unchecked and showing that you're right, the smallest little turn is all it takes to get there. That's what the book is about. And be perfectly honest, I'd be happy to read a book that's about the shock value of messing with these characters. And it's about the reveal and oh my God, isn't it crazy that Einstein is like, you made Einstein do that, you know? Because they have Einstein do crazy stuff in this book. It's just that isn't the focus of it. You know,
right.
Like when you cut to Einstein and Feynman on a spaceship, and Feynman has got like he's holding the 50 cal in his hand like Rambo, you know, you're just like, yeah, I guess that's what this character would do, as opposed to, oh my God, you see that? That's Albert Einstein. You know, it's just they just show that because this is who the character is, and it's just, and again, it's the idea of they are trusting the reader to understand that's inherently funny. The humor is in the visual gag there. We don't need someone looking around being like, that's Albert Einstein holding a 50 cal.
Right.
You know, you don't need to point it out and put an arrow on it. You just do that, and you accept it, and you don't make a meal out of it, because that isn't what the book is about.
Yeah. I think that it's revealing the subtle genius of this book. And I think the emphasis is on the word subtle, like, because I think there are probably people who picked this book up and just thought this is mindless anarchy nonsense. and it's really not. There are elements.
That's it. There's a lot of mindless nonsense in here, and that I think what makes the book that you get all of that, and you get the smaller, subtle commentary and the notes on there. I think they
but
mix
somehow he is able to like cue you as a reader.
Yes,
to say like, oh, on this page we're just kind of having fun with this idea, but on this page I'm actually saying something meaningful, and it's not jarring. And I think that's a very tough act to do. To say, here, I'm going to make a bunch of jokes about things that didn't actually happen because this is a dream state thing. And here, I'm going to make a serious statement about, what happens to the human mind under XYZ circumstances. And you don't feel like you're reading two different books.
Yeah, I agree entirely. The tone shifting isn't actually a tone shift.
Right. The tone he's created holds both of those things. And it is at the trade-off of what we've talked about. We don't really care about the characters, and we're fine with it. I would say I'm a character person, but I don't care. I don't care about any of these, except I got to say. And I am an animal person. I'm not a big dog person. But now that you have fully anthropomorphized the dog,
Laika, it changes her character.
Well, yeah, and I think you already feel a little bad for her, especially if you read Primordial from Lemire and Sorrentino. Yeah. There's like the idea that an unconsenting animal is sent into space, whether it's an ape or a dog or whatever, is just bonkers because it's so. It's a thing otherwise reserved for people who have trained their whole life for it or have $1 billion of net worth. No one else goes to space, other than unconsenting animals.
I think they addressed a little bit of that too, right? Because it is Yuri Gagarin who wants to. He was like, "This is my dog. I'm going to go find her." And Werner Braun Bond's like, "Yeah, I'm going to go because I want to get the black box that has all the information about where the ship went." It's like. Not really going for the dog. Like, I don't really care about that. Forget the fact that he has worked with her and he knows she speaks and is highly intelligent. He's like, no, man, there's data up there that we got to go get, and if we find the dog, hey, we find the dog. Great. But like, that's not why I'm going. That dismissal of an idea, it is a similar approach to, I think, how they've presented a lot of these characters. That it's like, I don't really care what happens to them. The characters are interesting, but when any of them die or go away, you're like, yeah, okay, that's just one less person in the cast right now.
Yeah.
You don't really feel it. There's no emotional attachment there. And again, I think as we've said, they're not trying to have an emotional attachment to your kids' characters. I don't think they're trying to invoke that in the reader.
Yeah.
Maybe, by the way, maybe with Laika because she is a dog.
Yeah.
Maybe with,
By the way, I did want to comment on a couple meta textual things here that are coming up from the joy. I usually am a trade reader on this podcast, so the joy of single issue is like really hitting me again and again. But it back in issue 17, in the back of it was the first solicit for a teaser, just one page splash for Manifest Destiny.
Oh,
which, isn't that interesting? Issue 17 of this.
Yeah.
I think that's enough to prove the concept of the alternate history monster thing.
Could be. Yeah.
It may have helped greenlight that, or it may have been like, you're 17 issues, you're over a year and a half into Manhattan Projects.
Yeah.
Maybe reading the first couple issues is what sparked the idea for Manifest Destiny. And then at the back of issue 21, which is the issue we've just been talking about, is not just the one page splash, because I've been enjoying all the one page splashes throughout of like the fade out and everything that was coming. It was like a golden era for Image Comics when this book was coming out. But there's a 3 or 4 page sneak peek into God Hates Astronauts. And
because
that had me wondering. Right. That had me wondering, like, okay, when these special previews go into creator-owned books, have they consented to have that rather than like, oh, Image gets its 2 pages to show, here are other titles you might like. We're actually going to print extra pages into this issue to show a preview of our buddy's book. Because I remember talking to Oh, good God. This is our last interview. He was talking about how
Matthew Roberts.
no. For Shadecraft.
Oh, Joe Henderson. Yeah, Joe.
Joe Henderson was saying like, oh, I wanted to make the issues a couple pages longer. And Image is like, that's fine. That's just money out of your pocket. And he's like, yeah, that's fine. I would rather have the book I want with less money than compromise the book and try to make a few more nickels here and there. So I was wondering, like, was there a financial trade-off for Hickman and Pitarra to let Brown have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages to promote his book in the back of theirs?
I mean,
or is that something that publishers like, no, we want to push this book, so we'll eat that cost?
I mean, I would imagine it's some combination of all of that. Like, obviously, Ryan Brown's a friend. He's a collaborator on this book. Image would have no problem be like, yeah, if you like this book, because this guy also drew in it, hey, check out this other book that this guy drew, Like, why not promote it to the audience of someone who's reading it? So I can see that. It
seems like a really natural segue from the preview they show and where it's coming in this series. And I think Hickman wrote this. It says, and now ... a sneak peek at the greatest thing since the invention of air. God hates astronauts. That seems like a Hickman pitch for the Brown book.
And again, I some of these guys, they're all friends, they're all collaborators, they work together. And I don't think there's a problem with that. And I can't imagine.
I got no problem with it. I think it's awesome.
No, from the idea of like, hey, if we went to Image and said, can we do this? I mean, for someone like Joe Henderson, maybe it comes out of his pocket. For someone like Hickman and Ryan Brown and maybe for Hickman, it's like, yeah, you want this space to do this, so we'll help bump it. We'll take that and give you a few extra pages to help promote this guy that we think we want to kind of hitch our wagon to a little. And God Hates Astronauts is an earlier project from Ryan Brown, but he's gone on to do obviously a ton of great stuff in Image. So it's not like that didn't work out for them. So yeah, any kind of synergy and cross-selling like that, a lot of that, I'm sure Image doesn't mind. You put extra pages in there and maybe it comes a little bit out of their pocket, out of the creator's pocket. But like I said, I don't think any of them mind at all. I don't think any of them care. It's all about, hey, these are our friends. They do cool stuff. If you like our stuff, maybe read their stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't mean to pull us so far off the story, but in the same way that they, put a little spotlight on God Hates Astronauts, I figured we'll honor the creative team that made that choice in their issues and point to that. And I think that's one that we've tangentially kicked around before. Like the name has come up of like, hey, maybe sometime we'll talk about God Hates Astronauts. But I don't think it's had serious consideration yet. Yeah,
I don't think so yet. But we're fans of Ryan Brown. 8 Billion Genies is one of my favorite books the past 10 some odd years new books that have come out. It's so good. So
yeah, and they're killing us with this little slow drip, like, here's a 10-page pocket story in the 8 Billion Genies universe that's only for sale at New York Comic Con or Chicago Comic Con.
I hope they go back to it someday. I know Ryan Brown had some health issues, which put some delays on the Lucky Devils, but that's still going to be coming out. There's going to be a surprise 10th issue, which I guess isn't a surprise anymore because they've announced that it's been solicited. But it was supposed to be a 9-issue series. So, it's cool to see him, at least from a mainstream standpoint, him being on and contributing issues to this book here, Manhattan Projects, early on in his career. I think probably when he was just doing like self-published stuff. And then from there to go on to see all the books that he's done with Charles Soule and got his own book at Image, all that stuff it's cool to get in and see someone in an earlier work and get a sense that, yeah, maybe someone saw something in him early and that someone maybe being, Jonathan Hickman, not a bad person to have kind of see your stuff and help give you a little boost up. But yeah, the stuff that came afterwards from him is really cool. And so to see someone like Hickman identify him early and have him and Pitarra bring him in to guest on these really random and weird. I mean, again, we're talking about the 3 Oppenheimer War books, and then the book where Leica turns into an anthropomorphized dog, like some really
Which is
wild
a big character
stuff.
design to give off to a one-off artist.
It is.
Potentially.
Potentially. But yeah, they gave him some crazy stuff to draw, and that is kind of in Ryan Brown's wheelhouse. So it's cool to cross sell like that, and again, to be identified early in kind of his mainstream career this way, I'm sure was a nice boost for him. Those are fun issues, and I part of me, I don't know, is there another issue he could have done other than the Leica issue? I guess maybe not in the story they were telling in this volume, right?
Not realistically, yeah.
Not given that was the outlier story in this volume, because so much of it was focused around the Kennedy assassination. Even though he said we got some tangential things with the Einsteins and all that. But yeah, I guess that being the one in space, that was probably the only one Ryan Brown could draw in that fit kind of the milieu of what he'd been doing in this series.
Yeah. And Brown does not appear in the follow-up series. That's all Pitarra.
Yeah. It's only the 4 issues there. So,
right. But it's Pitarra drawing Leica. So
yeah, that's very true.
I thought there's a good chance. Yeah. I was like, I didn't really pay attention to that. Maybe I should go look at that.
Well, and that is something.
This is the end of Brown on this book.
Maybe that is something we could talk about maybe next week. Maybe we'll put a pin in this idea of, obviously this is Pitarra and Hickman's world, but if they went off and did a bunch of these kind of side quest 4-issue miniseries that follow different stories, this could have been an opportunity where they bring in guest artists for those arcs,
or even guest
writers.
Yeah,
even guest writers.
That's the Black Hammer of it all. Like, I was joking
that's Black
about
Hammer. That's crazy Minor Threats. Yeah,
right. I was joking about like a crazy Snyder and Capullo one, but I'm like, if you gave them a 4-issue thing and we're like, here's the read the whole story, and now tell us 4 issues. How does this dual Einstein quest on an alien planet resolve? You would get a wild ride that would be a blast.
And I think, that's happening right now. I think the stuff that James Tynion is doing at Tiny Onion is doing something like that. Like,
he's just like, I think he's the ultimate quarterback. Like, he's so good at identifying talent
right now. Absolutely.
Passing the ball around.
Because they're doing that with Exquisite Corpses, which had a main run that he had contributors on, and that's going to have some spin-off series that have people brought in. They did that with the Slaughterverse book, Something is Killing the Children, and the kind of the very spin-off series there, bringing in people into that fold to tell more stories. So that maybe that's a little more modern convention, and I know it's weird to call something that's less than 15 years old not modern, but I think we're seeing more of that now. Again, you mentioned Black Hammer. I mentioned the Minor Threats universe, which is Jordan Blum and Patton Oswalt's their superhero adjacent connected universe, has the same sort of thing where they bring in, Blum and Oswalt are noted as co-creators of the world, and they're always credited as part of the story, but the script for some of these miniseries are all written by those authors and creators that are coming in. And Manhattan, this could have been exactly like that, where Hickman, Pitarra, and X writer, that's your story, but your script and your art is done by another team that brought in. And maybe if this book came out 10 years later,
that's exactly what I was going to say.
That would have been the style.
Or I think with someone who is not constantly behind on work, like Hickman seems to be.
But I think
this type of thing talks. Well,
that imperfect though.
Assuming you have,
you don't got to write all this stuff. Yeah,
I know, but even then, you have to be the director of it. Well, and I think it takes a wide angle lens.
He can do that though.
Necessarily has.
He can definitely do the wide angle lens part because he orchestrated the Krakoan era. You know, they had incredible writers in that writer's room, but it starts with his idea of how we're going to reimagine the X-Men. And then all that filters out. And then you're going to write an Excalibur book, an X-Force book. Here's the main X-Men book. I got that one here. So there are ways to do that.
Later, could he have done that in 2012, or is that a skill set he developed?
That's true. I don't know. That's a good point, because in 2012, at this time, you know, as I mentioned, we're leading up into big major moment coming up in Marvel Comics that he was helping orchestrate, leading up into the, you know, Secret Wars at the time, which again is just called Secret Wars, but it's the third Secret Wars technically, I think. But like that was leading up into that, and that was a huge moment. So he's done this kind of line-wide stuff. It would have been interesting to see him do that with his own project here. And if him and Pitarra could have done that for Manhattan projects, that'd have been really, really cool. But that concept is a little more last 5-6 years than it was last 10-15 years. So, you know, this was coming at a time when it very much was, we're going to do everything here. And ultimately, I guess that means we're not going to get any more of it, but it was set up to do something cool like that. Because it would have been, you could have handed off the little bits we see of the Einsteins and Dr. Fenman being on these crazy planet worlds. You could get like, that would have been one you could have maybe given to Ryan Brown and have him draw all kinds of crazy alien planets and races and things like that know, as they interact with the Einsteins and Fenman there. So,
well, I mean, I think the most interesting thing to me that I would like to see, which I actually doubt was even on the table, is to do, you know, a 4 or 6 issue thing where you actually replay all of the main narrative, but just from Fenneman's journals. Like, what was his keyhole into what happened from the time he was brought onto the project until the time he ends up with the Einsteins, because I feel like he has been looming over the whole series, but has had very little screen time. But his journals are like, his name is almost always bookend at the front of each issue.
I will say there is a version of this book where it is more like Manifest Destiny,
right?
Where the only narration we get is Fenman's journals.
Yes, which would be very, very interesting to me.
That'd be a very, very interesting book. Definitely, I agree. So even the stuff he wasn't present for, you know, but it's like, hey, I read the reports, you know, I'm copied, you know, I'm CC'd on these memos, so I know kind of what's happening there. There isn't that would be a cool thing, and because then you could have gone into this 5th volume here, and understanding this is where it diverges, you know, right. That I have now left off world. I'm now doing my thing. I don't know what's happening with Kennedy and LBJ. You know, I don't know what's happening with Garrigan, Von Braun, and Leica in space. So that would have been a really cool way, again, to kind of segue away from that as the creative team is ending this version of the story. That would have been really cool. And then now knowing when you go off into your other stories, you don't have that kind of third person observer perspective in Fenman. You no longer have what kind of assumes the reader's perspective. You only get that in his story. And so maybe when you go to Garrigan's story out in space, you get a different format in terms of narration or lack of narration. If you then go back to and follow General Groves and LBJ and what's left of the Manhattan projects, maybe you get a different story construction there. You know, that there were possibilities in the ways that could have really varied the follow-up series if they existed, if there was a little more consistent tone throughout the first few volumes. And it was nice, though, I felt at the end of volume 1 to go back to that, because the first 2 volumes were very much like following the narration or the journaling of Fenman. Then they kind of go away from that. And then it was nice in this volume to go back to that construction again. So I think I would have maybe liked to have seen that continue all the way through all 5 volumes.
Yes, I agree. I think the spotlight was never on him. And as the story fanned out further and further, it became harder and harder to justify giving him the page space.
I think so. Yeah. And so, but good on them to be like, you know what? He was our narration character, even though he's not like one of the 3 main characters. But then to not feel like, we got to stick with this, you know?
Yeah.
If
like
he,
there's so many, I can think of so many examples of times when you're just like, I can see what you're thinking, and I really admire your commitment to your original vision.
yeah,
But sometimes you just have to go with the way the book is taking you.
yeah, and be like, if we've established that Fenman and Albrecht Einstein are in a lab together, going off doing a bunch of crazy stuff that we're not always following. And if that's the case, if we just establish that they're going off and doing their things, if we don't come back to them for 2.5, 3 issues or whatnot, if you see them on 3 total panels in 2 issues, okay, that's how it's going to be. But we're not going to continue to force feed the narration conceit we have just by having Fenman be the guy who happens to walk into every room at the right time. You know, he happens to walk into the room from, I was delivering this thing and I saw, so there's a reason for him to have visual to narrate everything. They'd be like, no, man, he's off doing his thing because that's how the story works.
Even retconned it when basically the whole cast was drugged and shoved in a prison cell.
Mm-hmm.
You could have had him furiously writing there, or you could have had him be on the other side, and each time there's an interrogation room, he's just sitting in the corner with a notebook.
Yeah.
And that way he's collecting everyone's narratives and able to compile them all.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you're right. Like the story just didn't need it. Like we didn't need that framing device. Like I think about when I think about ditching a bad framing device quickly and brutally, I think the best version of that was in Mark Russell's Flintstones. Remember how like there was like a 1 or 2 page opening where it's talking about they're in like a history museum, a natural history museum.
It's present day looking back. Yeah.
And they just immediately dumped that and were so much better off for it. It was just like, we need a really gentle way to ease into what's going to be a wild series.
Yeah.
And it turns out, no, you didn't. Like you didn't even need that. That was probably just a bad note from someone else.
Well, I think we talked about that when we discussed this idea of like, maybe they thought they needed that to get people into it. And they realized, wait, no, the story isn't about looking backwards. It's just about living in the moment. So I remember talking about that maybe
and you don't
initially
have to explain to people what the Flintstones are. Like no one picked up this book like, I've never seen these characters before.
Yeah. So, but you're right. The idea that we started with something, and whether or not it was a long-term plan or just for one issue, the idea that like we're showing you this construct and it's not going to be like that's good. The first issues of the outlier issue.
Right.
So whether that was intentional or not, what you've created in hindsight is a narrative construct that doesn't appear anywhere else. So yeah, the fact that you're not beholden to that, where you always have to go back and have the idea of here is the present day commenting on the past, except no, the reader's already doing that. So why stick with it? And so, yeah, the idea that this idea of the journal, and it's not like the journal isn't present, because the interstitials that are like chapter breaks in between the issues still use quotes, quote unquote, that are pulled from Fenman's journal. So it isn't like it's been abandoned entirely. It's just they would abandon it inside the structure of the actual art pages, where you do or don't get his narration boxes. So it still looms over the story, but not in the same way. And so it's kind of like it was a bit of a way for them to kind of have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say, as we approach the end of this series and this discussion, I know we've got one more volume to go. I have been impressed with Pitarra's art, his storytelling ability, because this is not a book I would have picked up based on the art. Like this style is just not really my style. All of everyone has craggly lines all over their faces and kind of crude.
Yeah.
But which is funny because like that's so subjective. Like I also feel that way about Daniel Warren Johnson, even though I love Daniel Warren Johnson.
Sure.
Like it's just not my style. But when we were talking about the ancestry of this style of comic art, it obviously started a lot earlier than this, but I think it's had a strong following in the last decade or so of like people who maybe wouldn't have been as accepted in Marvel DC really blossoming in indie houses with this style, and that's great. And who's the other guy? Headlopper guy, Apocalyptic Girl, Andrew McLean. Yeah. Andrew McLean, another one like this. Yeah. And I think, obviously to a lesser extent, but I think a similarly crude style but different vibe is an Andrea Sorrentino, who those are unconventional ways to draw the human face, but conventional enough to drop into runs of Green Arrow and Old Man Logan or whatever it was. Yeah,
something that's dark and gritty in the superhero standpoint. Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, again, if someone showed me look how awesome this art is in this book and just grabbed a random issue and dropped me halfway in, I think I would be like, it's no offense, but it's just not my thing. So having the writing of Hickman draw me into this book and kind of expose me to a style art that I would not have been drawn to is a really good thing for me as a reader.
Yeah. That's, I mean, I know you're not saying that you are unique, but that's so true for so many readers. This idea of because it's a visual medium. You're going to look at a cover or flip through some pages and if that doesn't jump out to you right away, you're probably not going to pick up the book, and no one's going to fault you for that. If the art style doesn't grab you, that doesn't, it's personal taste. What are you going to do about it? But yes, if there is a writer that you're like, well, I trust this writer, I know this person, I know what they do, I'm going to give this book a shot. And it gives you a chance to get into the storytelling of an artist, even if the style isn't your cup of tea, like you said, right? If the actual style isn't there, but getting you into a story and so you see what their storytelling choices are. Yeah, it's the easiest way, I think, to be introduced to new artists.
Yeah, is to follow the writer.
Follow the right. Yeah.
And then it can also work in reverse, where
it can. Yeah,
I think the case of that would be to me a Dustin Wynn of saw what he did in Descender with Jeff Lemire, and I am permanently curious about any project he gets attached to. Any ongoing series, which I think he's doing another one with Lemire soon.
Oh, he is, yes.
Which makes it really easy for me. But anyway,
I
think we already. Oh my gosh! My favorite thing about this trade, I didn't even talk about yet. LBJ.
Oh, you know what? So
holy crap! It's glorious. When I found out LBJ was, I was like, of course this book was leading to LBJ. LBJ is the most this book. They had to do the least amount of change to his character from reality.
I was just going to say that we saw depictions of 4 presidents in this book, right? FDR, Truman, Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, and aside from how they've just decided that Lyndon Johnson wears the same thing all times, the boots, the yellow plaid shirt.
I mean, okay, but he was particular about clothes. Have you ever heard that phone call that was recorded in the Oval Office?
Yes.
When he called the pants company. Oh my God.
Yeah. But so aside from the actual physical way he's drawn, you're right. It was the smallest leap from known LBJ to Manhattan Project comic LBJ, in terms of his attitude and all that. But the fact that we've got these 4 presidents they've shown that are just so silly and absurd, and they're so fun and ridiculous. But the idea, that kind of in the end, LBJ was kind of the slyest, smartest, canniest of all of them, of the ones we've shown, but that's such a fun depiction. That's such a fun character.
Yeah. God, yeah, it's it's so good. And this is one where I'm sure it's gone by now, but if I saw Nick Pitarra at a con, which again, unlikely to happen, and he was still carrying original art, I would buy any panel that LBJ is on. It's so good. Especially him taking the cowboy revolver.
Yeah.
To the base where they're using advanced technology to develop the A-bomb, and he just walks in there
6-shooter.
400% confidence with a 6-shooter.
Yeah.
And the first thing he does is blow the agents' heads off, who are ostensibly there for his protection.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I don't need protection. Like, you guys let me in on the club. I'm down for whatever we're doing.
Yeah, I say, yeah, I'm going to shoot these guys to prove to the guys I'm trying to get by that A, I'm not messing around, but B, weirdly, you can trust me.
I know. And it worked.
Yeah.
But that, like, is this not just 20% more LBJ than what he did with the Senate?
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's the smallest leap from what we know of LBJ to the depiction here. Like, it's the closest thing. Then, obviously, then who knows? Maybe Truman was a crazy cultist. I don't know. But yeah, that depiction is so fun, and it is one of those things. And I think we'll talk about this more next week about the books we didn't get and what one of the pathways were, because clearly one of the pathways was Groves and LBJ working together now, right?
Yeah.
The remnants of the Manhattan projects from maybe specifically the military side, because it was obviously always military run, but all the scientists are gone now. All the scientists are off on their own missions, their own side quests. So what's left there in Los Alamos is Groves looking over all of this technology. And now he's in league with the guy who kind of is canny enough to maybe figure out how to use this. And so that would have been a really, really, really cool and interesting, I think, in a fun way, and a fun book to get at, in a large part because, God, that LBJ is so fun.
I know. I was like, I would read another 12 issues just of LBJ in this world.
Yes.
Because, and his would be hilariously the most straightforward Oval Office. Like, there would not be cult orgies or heroin addicted girls. It would be like straight down. It'd be brass tacks Oval Office.
Yeah.
It's just so cool.
Which is it's fun in this book though, right? Because so much of every interaction the Manhattan Projects had with the office of the president was them talking out of the side of their mouth, or being manipulative, like with Kennedy being like, listen, man, this is what's up here, but you're going to do it because you're kind of a fool and we own you. And he's like, yeah, okay, sure, I'll do it. So the idea of what that relationship would be with someone like this LBJ is super fun to think about. But you're absolutely right. That was what an incredible entrance for that character. We haven't seen him. Kennedy's been in office for a few volumes in this series, but we hadn't seen Johnson, and for him to come in like that, just in this volume and just be incredible, like just such a perfect characterization. Yeah, that was a super fun part about this book.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a blast. Like, I guess I should have seen it coming since they did the assassination of JFK, but I thought that was just, they talked about how they now need the Cold War to keep going.
Yes.
To keep people's attention off of them.
Yeah.
Which is a classic wag the dog type thing, except
indeed.
This is one where, like, the world has already presented the problem and the solution for them, but this is just them leaning into it and saying, we don't actually need to create anything, we just need to make sure no resolution happens for any of these people.
Exactly. Yeah. So but it is them, it is weirdly an evolution of their kind of mantra for what was started, right? It was the idea of like, before, we're doing this because we were given power to create this one thing, and under that guise, we're going to keep creating and going forward. Now they're like, well, now we need some cover, because that cover's gone now, so instead of manufacturing something, we can just, there's already tensions rising. This can be our cover to keep going. And that it's tonally in universe, which is a weird thing to say for a universe that's so absurd and ridiculous, but it makes logical sense in universe of, this allows us to keep going. Like it's almost like they need a suspension of disbelief internally
Right.
Those characters need, the people in that world need a suspension of disbelief to allow for these projects to continue in some way, even though so many things that should not be believed have already happened. But yeah, that's just an interesting avenue to go down for this book. Because the nature of science and exploration and discovery has to change for them, because they've obviously discovered so much already. That how do you keep that going? So the Cold War, makes perfect sense. And again, the idea of it dovetailing back into real world events again, more in line with real world events, and the potentially fun things they could do with that. The way they can play with history now, if they had continued down that track, that's a very fun thought exercise, as a completely different thought exercise than the Einsteins and Feynman can go literally anywhere anyone can think of, on the opposite end of the expect. It's like they gave themselves out to go in any of these directions potentially. I just wish they could have gone there.
Yeah, never say never, because I bet I suspect this is near and dear to Hickman's heart. And Pitarra doesn't do much else in comics. I'm sure he's like a visual artist. In lots of other ways. In
terms of interiors, and
story, so like sequential art.
I saw Pitarra at a show a couple years ago, and he drew a little Einstein head on the cover of Manhattan Project #1. He just did it. It wasn't like I had to pay for a mark or anything like that. He was like, I'll sketch this here. And it's phenomenal. I love it. It's great. I would,
if I meet him, I'm being like, any amount of money you want, you can draw it on any blank cover of any book or just on a piece of notebook paper. I want a hand-drawn thing of LBJ with the 6-shooter. Like, that's all I want. And it seems pretty doable.
Yeah, I'd probably do it. He didn't have a huge line there, but I wouldn't be shocked if they all of a sudden said, "Hey, here's a new Manhattan Projects miniseries." I
think that would probably coincide with like I suspect, I don't know which would go first, but if you hear that they're doing a paperback compendium of the original Manhattan Projects, it would not shock me to hear that. Oh, and also coming this fall is, Manhattan Projects :
something. Yeah. Well, I think
LBJ Quest.
And we said this back in the Zero, like there are deluxe editions of Manhattan Projects, but there's only 2 volumes, and they only encompass volumes 1 and 2, and then volumes 3 and 4. Let me double check that real quick here. So volume 5 and 6, I don't believe are hardcore volume 1. Yes. Yeah. Issues 1 through 10, and then issues 11 through 20. So they have been collected in, the deluxe format or whatever you want to call it, but not all of it. So if you have those deluxe volumes, you're still waiting on, you don't have volume 5, and you don't have the upcoming volume 6 that we're going to talk about next week. So it does seem rife of like, here's a compendium, or here's everything right there. 29 issues. If you include the issues we're going to talk about next week, that's like a perfect size. They could drop out there, And
it's what the Unwritten did. They only finished one of the deluxe hardcovers, but they've gone to compendium and now have announced that the second part of it will be out in September, which will complete that run. It's going to be very, very cool. Yeah. And that one, I think Mike Carey is just kind of a stick and move guy. Like, I don't think he ever intends to return to the world of the Unwritten, even though it'd be very, very easy. Yeah. Like, there's so many pockets there to tell stories in. Mm-hmm. He just has too many ideas, and he rips them out and he moves on.
What I will say is this, for this book here specifically, did the moment to follow this up in any way, shape, or form pass after Oppenheimer movie? Like it would have had to have come out within sometime last year, right? Because Oppenheimer was 2024. Help me out.
Yes.
Wasn't it?
Yes. But since Oppenheimer's already dead in this story, like what would the pitch be
That's fair.
We're bringing back
yeah.
Manhattan Projects.
Yeah. But it would just be like,
and if you haven't read it yet, Oppenheimer died 10 issues ago.
But I guess what it would have been then would have been like, on the heels of the movie, quote unquote, on the heels, we put out the compendium. So you can get, here's everything. Here is our story about the Manhattan Projects. That's the compendium release. And then off of that, here is our follow-up, some almost 10 years after the last issue. So
that would have been good timing. Although I do think
it would have been. Although they probably don't
I think
like
amazingly there was surprise over the hype that the Oppenheimer movie got, which seems foolish at the time. But I mean, I heard Nolan say leading up to the Odyssey that like the Odyssey only happened because Oppenheimer far exceeded their expectations in terms of performance. Like, I think in the month before that, there was a lot of buildup, but in the year before that, when I saw the teaser of like, you heard the ticking clock in the Geiger counter and all this stuff, and it's like, he had a big swing and miss in the theaters with Tenet, and Oppenheimer is not really
had a swing and miss because
name.
of COVID. Tenet killed COVID.
Tenet killed COVID. COVID killed Tenet.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I also think it's his worst movie, but
I disagree entirely. I love Tenet, but yes, I they didn't expect Oppenheimer to make as much as it did. Part of that was fueled by that and Barbie and all of that as well. But it's also, it's 2/3 of a really excellent movie in my mind. But so they say, I'm not saying Image would have like ridden those coattails fully, but this idea of like, oh, hey, we have this book from a writer that a lot more people know now than they did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So there maybe could have been something in there. I wonder if at least a phone call was made. Like, hey,
right.
Just
throwing this out there.
Yeah. And then being like, nah, man, we're not going to do that. The book is out there. So, but who knows, I said, I would never be shocked if this book ever came back. Just because I don't know, Hickman got bored and was like, hey man, I got a new story. Let's knock it out. But it would, I don't know. We'll discuss this next week. I'm certain of like, was it better to get one story after this or to get no stories, and that's unfair because we should judge the story next week, volume 6 in and of itself.
I think we'll do both.
I think we'll probably do both. We'll probably do both. But yeah, this is a fun one. And I think I've said it multiple times. I am glad that I finally read the full thing after having seen Oppenheimer and had more awareness over all of the Manhattan Projects. I think that helped me just get into the world easier than if I had read these when I first picked them up, which I think again was probably during 2020, sometime during lockdown, where I got all these and had them. It's like, I'm going to read these at some point, and then never got around to them except the first one, So sitting down and getting to read them all now, just with a better understanding of who these characters are and things like that, I think that helped me for my enjoyment of this book, which I enjoyed greatly. It said if they were all fictional characters that had done this, I think I would have enjoyed it pretty much just the same. But the fact that I had a sense of who these real world people were, I think I got that kind of little extra kick out of it.
I agree with that. I mean, I think the stupid thing is, had they been fictionalized but been this exact same story, we would have the podcast discussion would have been consumed by making the different comps.
Yes, who was this person?
Like,
who was that?
I think this was supposed to be your, Fenneman, and then it's like a lot more research and stuff like that for something that doesn't ultimately amount to anything. So, anyway, yeah, I think they made the right choice with the heavily fictionalized versions of history.
I agree.
And I think they laid the pipe work for great stuff. And I think I would have, we'll talk about this more next week, but even if he said, I'm reopening the canon to Manhattan Projects, but I'm too busy to write anything, and he was just going to be the general editor for 4-issue miniseries.
Like a Tiny Onion kind of thing.
Like a Tiny Onion type thing, especially if he was using it the way Tiny Onion does, which is to elevate artists who
bring some more people in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or yeah.
Because nothing helps more than, an artist who doesn't really have a name or reputation yet, getting their name on what becomes a speculator book, because it's.
But I think also just
it's Tynion.
What we just talked about as well, like Ryan Brown wasn't big in mainstream when he was doing these issues. I think he had been working, self-publishing, stuff on the web, but like he wasn't a mainstream artist, even in the creator-owned world, before doing some of the books, the issues on this series. So, they brought people in and done that. If they came back and they said, this is what we're going to do with this property, I'm with you. I think that'd be a blast. That'd be a blast.
Yeah.
Maybe we Dreamcast some of this for next week, what the various teams would be. No, let's not do that. That's a bad rabbit hole to go down.
My gosh. Yeah. We'd be here literally all day.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that's just cruelty to ourselves, because
it is. Yeah. Yeah.
If you come up with a great idea, it's like, congratulations.
It never leaves.
Now you just dream about all the things you've been denied.
Yep.
And next time you meet Hickman at a show, you'll resent him.
Be angry
for what he didn't give you.
Yeah.
So anyway, we don't.
But it's fine though, because he's not doing any. I've never seen him on a show before, because I don't think he does shows at all anymore.
I thought you had.
I've seen him once, but that was part of the X-Men Krakoa launch stuff. So I think that might have been contractually obligated by Marvel, because he didn't have a booth at Artist Alley at that year C2E2. He was just there at the official signing at the Marvel booth with all of the X-Office writers. So I think he might have been contractually obligated to do that and a panel or two, but he was not sitting at a table in Artist Alley. So I have seen him once before. Don't really anticipate ever seeing him on a guest list ever again, unless it's San Diego or New York and he's launching something big. So,
yeah, in which case you'd be paying,
way more
X-Men Krakoa era signature for Manhattan Projects or Nightly News or something like that. And
yeah, well, I would definitely want to get him on the two books I have Pitarra on, which are Manhattan Projects 1 and Red Wing 4. Actually, I think I have signed, because I like that cover. But my
thing is, I want people to sign the books that we've talked about on the podcast.
Well, yeah,
that's my secret bucket list, because then I get to talk to them about the podcast, and more often than not, that results in them coming on the podcast.
Yeah.
And then I have a great keepsake from the whole thing. So anyway,
indeed.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. We will be back next week with I'm pretty sure we're going to label it Volume 6, even though it is called Volume 1.
Well, in single issue, it is just Manhattan Projects, The Sun Beyond the Stars. But the trade for that is Volume 6. It is Manhattan Problems Volume 6, The Sun Beyond the Stars. So it is not Volume 1 of the subset. It is labeled as Volume 6 of this series. So it's a little wonky,
like that
confusing.
On Comic Geeks. I just wasn't sure if that was actually official, or if some fan was just like, we're going to simplify this. So the editors were fine with it.
It is Volume 6, and for all intents and purposes, that it is the next part of the story. So, but it is just 4 issues. So if you are looking for the single issues, it is The Sun Beyond the Stars, issues 1 through 4.
Awesome. Thank you for listening. We will see you back here next week. Same time, same place, and StoriedArcs.com, Blue Sky, Instagram, none of which I've yet updated with the fact that we're doing the Manhattan Projects as I record number 5. So I will get on that today. We'll backlog, we'll schedule, and we'll be back on track on social media. And you can shoot us a message on those platforms anytime. Peace. Nope. That's your line.
Hey, man, we're out.
See you later.